Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Welcome to Inside Scoop, Virginia. I am your host, Catherine Reed. Tonight we are going to be talking about racial diversity in our justice system here in Virginia. I have three wonderful guests with me this evening, and our first guest in this first segment is Justin E. Fairfax. He is the former Assistant United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. That's correct, yeah. And he is also one of the principals in this new coalition, and it's a long title. It is the Virginia Coalition for Racial Diversity in the Justice System. Luckily, they have a hashtag, and the hashtag is Diversity in Justice VA.
Correct, yes.
Thank you so much for joining me, Justin.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I was very interested last night in the Oscars.
Yes.
It was the lowest viewership of the Oscars, I think, in its history, or at least in modern history.
Yes, yes.
Because there was a lot of talk over how white the Oscars were.
Right.
And Chris Rock really used that platform.
Yes, he did.
And humor.
Yes, he did.
To address something that really is pretty shocking.
Yes.
In 2016.
Absolutely.
But even more, I think, surprising is that the president of the Screen Actors Guild, Cheryl Boone Isaacs, in the middle of that award show, came out and said to that membership, you have to recognize that this is on you.
Right.
And that we all have to take responsibility. And of course, immediately I heard her words and thought about the lobby day we had on Friday.
Yes, absolutely.
Down at the General Assembly in Richmond.
Yes. Going
to talk to legislators with much the same message.
That's right.
So explain to us, in Virginia, and when we talk about the justice system, there's a lot more than judges. We're focused right now on judges.
On judges, that's right.
So explain to our viewership how judges are selected in Virginia.
Yes, well again, thank you so much for having me on, and I love the analogy that you made to the Oscars. Getting to your question about how judges are selected, Virginia is one of only a couple of states in the country that selects its judges through the legislature. So our General Assembly in Virginia is the body that actually chooses judges and installs them, which is why we went to Richmond for our lobby day and talked with our legislators, our delegates and senators about the importance of having increased diversity in the judiciary. It is their responsibility. And what we have seen is that when you look at the numbers, so many people were really shocked and surprised at the real lack and the dearth of diversity among the judiciary in Northern Virginia in particular. We believe that this exists in other parts of the state, and we had people from Hampton Roads and Richmond and Southside who also indicated that it was a problem in their area. But we started this issue looking at the Northern Virginia judiciary. And again, what we found was really stunning in terms of the numbers.
And I think we have a slide that says, why are we here? And it's basically a slide or graphics that show that it is fairly amazing. 74 judgeships.
Yes, in Northern Virginia, and only about 7 of those judgeships are filled by minority judges.
So that would be surprising, because you think of Northern Virginia. Remember, we have more judges because we are a higher density.
Yes.
But we also tend to be more diverse than other parts of the state.
That's absolutely right. And so if you look globally at Northern Virginia, more than a third, nearly 40% of Northern Virginia is a minority population if you look at the demographics. And it becomes even more striking when you look at various jurisdictions. So some that will stick out are Fairfax County. As we know, an incredibly diverse county. About 48% of Fairfax County's population is minority, and yet only 3 out of 32 judges in Fairfax, or 9%, are minority. So that gap between the 48% minority general population and the 9% of judges is really glaring. It exists in other places. Loudoun County, for instance, about 41% of Loudoun County is minority. 0% of the judges in Loudoun County are minority. Loudoun County has never appointed a Hispanic, African American, or Asian American judge in its history. And Prince William County is another really striking example. Prince William County, as we know, has changed dramatically demographically over even the last 10 or 15 years. It is now a majority-minority county, jurisdiction, and yet only 1 out of 15 of its judges is minority, so 7%.
And that's interesting because each, as I discovered, because I am not of the legal profession, this is not my area of expertise.
But you've been a great champion.
I'm on the outside looking in, as I'm sure a lot of our viewers are like, I don't know much about this. But let's think in terms of two things. People who are attorneys and want a career path. Have to be asking themselves, what do you have to do to get the judgeship? That's the first thing.
Yes, absolutely.
The second thing is if you're somebody standing in a courtroom, and
Right.
you are of a diverse population, and you look around at the prosecutors and defense and judges, you might end up with a jury of your peers, but you could be looking at a judicial system that isn't reflective
That's
of the community you live in.
That's right, and that really is a significant problem and an issue, one that I hope that we're going to address constructively through this effort. As you mentioned, going to court is never fun in any context, but particularly when you go to court and you don't see among the staff, whether it's the judge, the clerks, the staff in the courthouse, people who reflect the community, it really can undermine people's confidence in whether or not they're getting equal justice, whether or not they're treated equally under the law. And again, particularly when you have a very diverse general population, and that's really not reflected at all on the bench, it sends signals to people. And as you mentioned earlier, we're focused on judges in this particular discussion, but this coalition is focused on diversity in the justice system more broadly, as you noted. So that includes prosecutors, who in Virginia are called Commonwealth's attorneys. In their offices, we've seen a really a significant lack of diversity in those offices. And remember, I'm a former federal prosecutor, so I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office. And so that's something that's very important from my standpoint when you're talking about enforcing criminal laws. And you want to make sure that, again, people have confidence that it's being done impartially, that it is reflective of the broader community, and that there's not some sort of bias that exists in the system. Similarly, in public defenders' offices in Virginia, again, we've seen a significant lack of diversity there as well. And so, at every phase and at every stage of the justice system, we believe that you have a better, more robust jurisprudence if you have a diversity that's reflective of the community. And certainly we know that the trust of the general public in the system increases when people believe that it reflects them and their community.
And in our jury system, being tried by a jury of your peers, and for a long time it was 12 angry men who all looked the same. And then, women were suddenly serving on jury duty, and minorities were serving on jury because it was now we all have to, whether we want to or not, right? We get the notice in the mail and you have to do it.
That's right.
And so it makes not a lot of sense that we don't look more broadly in the courtroom to see if we're so committed to a jury of your peers, why aren't we committed wholly to a judicial system that is more reflective of the peerage of those who appear before the court?
It is an excellent point. And as you mentioned, there is a long history of dealing with that specific issue with regard to diversity of jury pools and of actual juries that try defendants. There have been Supreme Court jurisprudence on this. People, even today, can challenge a conviction or a proceeding in court if they can show evidence, Batson challenges is what they're called, that there was some sort of bias in the selection process. So for instance, someone tried to strike all of the minority jurors from a pool, or all of the women, and so it's important, as we know, to be tried by a jury of your peers, by a group of people who are reflective of the community, and by extension, to your point, that's equally important, if not more so, to make sure that the rest of the justice system similarly reflects the population. So that's judges, it's prosecutors, it's public defenders, it's the staff, it's everyone. Because again, the community really, and the court system really belongs to all of us. It is one of the most democratic institutions that we have. You vote, you serve on juries. Those are two incredible things in military service that you can do as an American. And we want to make sure that that's open to everyone, that it's accessible, and that everyone has that same opportunity.
So the first thing that anyone has ever, because I work with women candidates, right?
Yes, and you do a brilliant job.
So we don't have enough women in office because not enough run.
That's what you hear, right?
So we're going to go to that place that says, well, if we don't have enough minority judges, surely it is because not enough are applying. Myth number one.
Myth number one.
And I think we actually have a little chart there that they can show the people at home about how did we get here, the common myths of there's not enough qualified applicants.
Yes, and this is maybe the biggest of all of the myths, which is to say that minority candidates, being attorneys, don't apply for judgeships, and that's why you don't see very many minority judges. We know that's not true empirically. What we found just through our study of applications over the past 15 to 20 years is that more than 25 candidates have applied really since 2000 for judgeships in Northern Virginia. So that's in every jurisdiction: Alexandria, Arlington, Loudoun, Fairfax, and Prince William. And yet, virtually none of them has been selected. As I mentioned, and as your viewers have seen from the earlier slide, out of 74 judgeships in all of Northern Virginia, only about 10%, 7 of those judgeships are held by minorities. Fairfax County provides a really specific example of this problem. As I mentioned, 48% of Fairfax County is minority, the population. Right. There has not been an African-American judge selected to the General District Court in Fairfax County in 29 years, since 1987. There has not been an African-American judge selected to the Circuit Court in Fairfax County, Virginia, in 24 years, since 1992. And I actually clerked for that really distinguished judge, who is now a federal judge, Judge Gerald Lee. He was the last one in 1992 appointed to the Circuit Court, African-American. And finally, the only African-American who sits on the Fairfax County Court of the 32 judgeships is a great judge by the name of Gail Carr. She is on the Juvenile and Domestic Relations Court. She was appointed in 1994, 22 years ago.
Wow.
And so these are really stunning numbers, not just in the raw data in terms of how many judges are minority and are sitting, but in how long it's been. And the signal that sends also to people who do apply, the more than 25 in 2000, since 2000. Right.
What are my chances?
What are my chances, right? I've seen literally a generation or two of minority attorneys be turned down and rejected. So what does that say to me? And I'm someone who's trying to build my career.
Right.
You're taking a chance when you put in for a judgeship, and I want more people to take that chance. But if the signals that are being sent are, you really don't have much of a shot, and look at these numbers, that really will dissuade people and have a chilling effect. So although we have seen a significant number of people apply, imagine how many more might have applied if they didn't see people for the prior 22 or 24 or 29 years be rejected. And so again, we've seen a similar pattern across the board. And this is applied again, not just to African American candidates, but Hispanic candidates.
And Latino.
And Latino in particular. In Fairfax, we've never had a Latino Hispanic judge appointed. In Loudoun, as I mentioned, we've never had a minority appointed at all.
Well, we are going to come back after our break because I want to introduce our viewers to Ann Liu when we return, and we are going to bring Justin back at the end of our show to talk about how we are going to actually address this through this new coalition of attorneys and people who are in the justice system. So please join me after this break.
Too many women get hit by their boyfriends and husbands. Too many women are pressured into having unprotected sex. Half of the people in the world living with AIDS are women. It doesn't have to be this way. Together, we can change this reality. Let's strive for a world free of violence.
At Volunteers of America, we don't just give kids a way to stay off the streets. We give them the tools they need to reach their full potential. We don't just help the elderly receive needed care. We help them live life to the fullest. We don't just provide food for homeless individuals and families. We provide job training and placement so they can buy groceries. Volunteers of America is a national organization that for over 100 years has provided programs and services that allow people to overcome their challenges to become vital members of their community. At Volunteers of America, we don't just help people, we help people help themselves. Find out how you can support the programs that are working in your community. Contact Volunteers of America today. Call 1-800-899-0089.
Drivers face all kinds of distractions.
Guys, stop playing. No.
127 consecutive.
Before your wireless phone becomes one of them, stop. Drive safely. Keep your phone in easy reach and dial sensibly. In bad weather or traffic, call later and use a hands-free device. Remember, with wireless, safety is your call.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed. We're talking about racial diversity in our judicial system this evening. Joining me tonight is Ann Liu. She is with the Asian Pacific American Bar Association of Virginia, which is a very long bar title. But specialty bars, and that's something we mentioned briefly when I was talking to Justin, is that we don't have one bar association. There are a number. There's the Virginia Bar Association, Fairfax Bar Association. There is the Asian Pacific American Bar Association, the Hispanic Bar Association. We're going to be talking to Karen later about the Women's Bar Association, Black Women Attorney Association. How do these bars end up factoring in who is selected for an interview or what candidates are considered qualified? Explain to us, since we have members of the legislature deciding who actually gets these judgeships. First of all, there's a much lower level selection process, and how does that work?
Okay. Hi, Karen. Well, thank you for doing this program. I think this is a very important topic. In terms of the specialty bars, the Virginia State Bar is the mandatory bar, and if you are an attorney, you have to be part of the Virginia State Bar. All other bars are what we call voluntary bars. Fairfax Bar Association is a voluntary bar. Our association, the American Pacific American Bar Association, we call APAPA VA, is also a specialty bar. You have the Hispanic bar, so these are voluntary bars that people can be a part of. As when you go through a judicial selection process, the local delegates will reach out to the specialty bars and say, "Can you please interview these candidates that are applying for the position?" So the specialty bars then interview these candidates for the position, and they don't have to interview with us. The candidates who want interviews are given interviews, and so I was co-chair of the Judicial Nomination Committee as part of APAPA VA for several years, and as part of that, we interview candidates who became before us for the Supreme Court of Virginia, the appellate courts, for all of the circuit court positions as well. And we don't interview just the minority candidates, we interview all candidates. And as part of that process, I have seen many minority candidates who are very well qualified, if not more so than some of the candidates who are getting positions when there is a vacancy. And I that is a trend that's been happening, as Justin spoke about previously. And we put a lot of time and effort as our specialty bars into conducting these interviews. We write letters to the governor asking our recommendations to be considered. Sometimes we feel like they fall on deaf ears because we don't know if they are being considered, but we sure hope so.
Well, when we met with David Boulevard on Friday, I think what I walked away with, not knowing really anything about this process, is that it's very different from one county, one district to another. And so David explained that they have a matrix, which sounds like a wonderful idea. He gives credit to Delegate Dave Albo, not only for maintaining the process that they've had in place for a number of years, but also of coming up with this matrix. But there's probably a lot of factors that need to be included in that matrix. And somebody had mentioned the fact that a lot of judges come from the prosecutorial side rather than the defense side, which I have a feeling is probably not something on that matrix either. So when you think about it, there's a lot of factors that go into who actually gets an interview, correct? I mean,
yes. Before the local delegates.
Right, before the delegates interview them.
Yes. In terms of the specialty bars, everybody gets an interview who wants an interview.
Right.
But once you get up to the delegates and to the General Assembly, they
select.
They decide, they select who gets an interview. Just because you apply for the position doesn't mean you get an interview. And I think it needs to be more transparent as to who gets selected for an interview, because it really is all about transparency, I think. The public should be able to understand how our judges are selected, because these judges are making decisions about their lives. The community comes before the judge. Most attorneys, we come before the judges in our positions as attorneys, not as the community where a judge is deciding our faith.
Right.
And so I think that it is imperative that the selection of judges before the local delegates and before the General Assembly are as transparent as possible, especially when it comes to the local bars, like Fairfax Bar Association, the Loudoun County Bar Associations. And for the lower seats, like the circuit court seats in these various counties, they have their own selective process. And I think it would be important and would benefit the community if, especially the attorneys, the bar at large, if the attorneys who are applying for these positions can understand what is put into the selection process.
Right.
And we don't know, so when an attorney gets turned down, especially a minority attorney gets turned down for a position that they are well qualified for, and without any reason or without knowing what could be done differently or what they could do better the next time around, it's hard to kind of get your foot in the door if you don't know what you did wrong.
Yeah, right. Like what, and so I know that David too talked about persistence and being persistent, and that some people apply more than once. Gerald Lee, who Justin Fairfax referenced, applied 3 times before he was selected for a judgeship. Went on to have a stellar career, a well-regarded judge, but 3 times before he actually got a judgeship. Working with women candidates is a very special place to be, because women candidates in particular are not necessarily quite as resilient when it comes to getting knocked down and standing up and doing it again. Has that been your experience? Do you think there is part of, with women of color and women who are minorities, not being as resilient, not feeling like once they've been turned down and they don't know why they were turned down, not coming back to try again?
Absolutely. And I think that is more so with the minority population, women minority, because we are at the bottom of the totem pole for minority women. And I personally know of several minority women who have put in an application to be a judge, and they were found either not qualified or not suitable. And these women have distinguished careers, and I think it's true. I think it's due to our gender, and I think it's also due to cultural, and especially speaking from an Asian culture. I think more often than not, we do cower back. When somebody tells us no, it's hard for us to voice our opinions and say, no, I deserve this, and these are the reasons why I deserve it. And I think it's harder for women in general, especially minority women, to take that stance, and because you don't want to be seen like, okay, I'm this angry woman, or
aggressive,
loud,
yeah, all the things that
exactly.
get applied when you're assertive, you're aggressive, right?
Right, and so it really is a no-win situation. Right. So when you try to be aggressive, you try to voice, and we a lot of the delegates or a lot of people say, well, you need to keep trying, you need to keep coming back, and you need to keep pushing in. Once you actually do that, then you're seeing as well. This girl, she's pushy. She's too pushy. We don't want her on the bench. And
I know,
what's her
all
temperament?
Those negative things. And a lot of times, I'm not saying that people even are aware that they have a bias. I think we all have biases about all kinds of things. What is your hope with the coalition? Is the hope part of this in raising awareness, just like Cheryl Boone Isaacs did at the Oscars, saying, you may have voted for your favorite movie, but you didn't really look at the totality of all of the artists, and in voting without taking that into consideration, these unacknowledged biases have affected the outcome.
Yes, I mean, that is a top priority, is to raise awareness, not only to push for more a diverse branch, but we want the community at large to understand some of the statistics that you have already spoken about and already went over with Justin. I mean, it's just heartbroken. I'm heartbroken to see that, in a community such as Fairfax, where almost half of the population is minority, right, but we have so few judges. And I don't believe, especially, for example, Loudoun, where I live, almost half of the population in Loudoun are minorities.
Right.
we don't have one single minority judge in Loudoun. And so I don't think the community at large understands that.
Because unless you go in front of a court, and how often I don't go in front of the court, why would that be on our radar?
Right. And I think we need the minority judges because as our community grows and becomes more diverse, you need a more diverse branch. Because when I was a law clerk, and I clerked out in Prince William for several years, and I saw on the other side of the bench when I was clerking, but a lot of the immigrants or the minorities that come before the judge, and sometimes there are more immigrants because of the Hispanic population out in Prince William County, but you have these attorneys who represent the minorities, and they say, well, you have to understand the cultural background of my client. They did this because so-and-so, because
right.
what, and I think that having a judge who understands that background only serves the greater good and serves the community at large.
It's a different lived experience. I argue the same thing about why gender matters in our legislature and why having women there is important. It's a different lived experience. And people, whether it's constituents or people before the court, need to feel like somebody is in that courtroom who truly has a similar lived experience or who they can see mirrored in front of them. And I do think it's important. Where do you think we go from here?
Well, I think we have to do a few things. I think we need to do more outreach. I think we need to reach the younger attorneys as well. And speaking for myself, as a law clerk, in looking at the bench, and if you don't see any minorities on the bench, you think to yourself, how do I get there? And I think that if there is a more diverse bench, those minority judges, I think, would tend to hire more diverse clerks,
which creates a bench of talent, a
right,
pipeline.
And it's a pipeline. And so these clerks who comes in and they clerk for these judges, they say, well, if he can or she can get there, I can certainly make my way there. And I think it gives us a sense of hope, to these younger attorneys who are just coming up.
Right. So you can't be what you can't see.
Right.
And
exactly.
I think that's true in so many things. And we've gotten accustomed, and I think this is, again, part of this kind of unacknowledged bias. We've gotten used to what we think is normal. And therefore, we don't question until something like this coalition brings this issue before the public and says, out of 74 judges, only 7 who are minority is not reflective of the community. It's not reflective of the people who are inside that courtroom. It's not benefiting the community.
No, and I absolutely agree. And I think the problem is that, in terms of the coalition, like I said, we are trying to raise awareness of this issue because the community, they don't understand. They don't see it. They don't, unless, like you said, unless you go before the court, you don't see what's going on. You don't know how it is going to affect you personally until you come before the court.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you being on the show. Please join us after this break. We are going to talk to Karen Turner McWilliams about her experience going through this process. And thank you so much again. I appreciate it. I'm going to learn to say Asian Pacific American Bar Association of Virginia. Join us after this break.
I helped turn my child's public school into a whole new kind of school. One with a curriculum that really motivates kids. One that has extended hours, 6 days a week, year-round. With loads of academic, cultural, and recreational activities. One that has support services like medical and dental right there. A school where parents' involvement is encouraged. Where teachers have more time to teach. And students are excited about learning. There's just one problem. My child doesn't ever want to come home. You can help turn your school into a community school for excellence. Find out how. Call 1-877-LOVE-TO-LEARN.
It's coming. Right to your neighborhood. And when it does, you may be surprised. It's your Social Security statement of your benefits, and it's going to help you plan your financial future. Your benefit statement will tell you how much Social Security you're eligible to receive and when you'll get it. Then you'll know how much you need to save for retirement, because that's coming too. The future is in your hands. Choose to save.
The toxic fumes from this meth lab are seeping into Jamie's sinus cavity. Ammonia vapors invade her throat. Toxic gases fill her lungs. Jamie's body is deteriorating. And she doesn't even know it.
Jamie, dinner.
So, who has a drug problem now? Find out how meth affects you at drugfree.org/.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop Virginia. I'm your host, Catherine Reed. We are talking about racial diversity in our justice system. Joining me in this segment is Karen Turner McWilliams, who is the past president of the Virginia Association of Black Women Attorneys. All of these are so long. Thank you for joining me, Karen.
You're welcome.
So we met each other for the first time at Lobby Day on Friday.
Yes.
And I was captivated by the fact that you chose to share your story about applying to be a judge.
Yes.
Which is not something up to that point that you had felt comfortable sharing. But I think people need to hear real life stories, not just statistics. Charts are great, graphs are great, but what sticks with people is, so who are these people who aren't being selected? And that would be you.
That's correct, and thank you for having me and for encouraging me to speak more broadly about this. So in 2006, I applied for a circuit court vacancy in Fairfax County, which was the same type of judgeship that Judge Lee, who we've been talking about, that was the bench that he sat on in Fairfax County. At the time, I had been a partner at 2 AmLaw law firms, one in Washington, D.C., but when I applied for the job, I was working for one of the largest law firms globally called DLA Piper. I was a full equity partner there in their Reston office. I had graduated from law school in Virginia. I was a member of Law Review. I actually taught law students how to write legal briefs. I had taken on an internship when I was in law school at the DC Superior Court. And so, by all accounts, I was accomplished and certainly qualified to be a circuit court judge, so I thought. As Ann and Justin already explained, part of the process is to interview with the various bar associations. So I interviewed with the Fairfax Bar Association to express my interest in being a judge, and the Fairfax Bar Association found me not qualified to be a circuit court judge. And that was a very humbling experience. And like I said, one that I had not talked about publicly until I went down to Lobby Day last Friday.
And so that carries a lot of weight. And talking with David Bulova, he said they do have a matrix in Fairfax, which is different because each district, and to me this is amazing, have their own way of doing it, whether it's 2 delegates having a conversation over coffee and picking a judge, which I'm sure probably happens more than we'd like to think, to other counties like Loudoun and Prince William who do it their own way. But there is a matrix in Fairfax County where he said they do take into consideration the other bar associations, and there are several: the Hispanic Bar, the Asian Pacific Bar, the Old Dominion Bar, you know, the association you were involved with.
Yes.
But it would seem that there may be undue weight given to the Fairfax Bar.
That's exactly right. So the other bars that you mentioned are known as specialty bars, and they are statewide bars for the most part, except for the Northern Virginia Black Attorneys Association. The remainder are statewide bars. So I was the past president of the Virginia Association of Black Women Attorneys, which is a statewide bar. And those associations, the Women's Bar of Virginia, the Virginia Association of Black Women Attorneys, et cetera, found me qualified to be a judge, but the Fairfax Bar deemed me unqualified. And as part of that process, the members of the Fairfax Bar get to vote. It's sort of a popularity contest on who becomes a judge. And on that ballot, the designation of the Fairfax Bar is associated with your name. So my name could have appeared on the ballot, but beside it, it would have read not qualified. And I made the decision to withdraw my candidacy at that point because I did not want sort of the stigma
right.
of being deemed not qualified by the Fairfax bar, even though all of these other bars found me to be qualified. But I just didn't want that record or that stigma of being deemed not qualified by the Fairfax bar associated with my name. I think a lot of diverse colleagues in all professions have always been told you have to be better than and strive harder and work harder to achieve just to be placed on equal footing. And I always think that I've done that in my professional career, and so I just could not be Judge Lee and go against the grain.
Three times. And I do think, to me, having worked with women candidates so much, that this is a common story among women who are like, well, okay, then I'm just not going to do this again. Getting knocked down and not even understanding why, or not feeling like you have enough feedback to go back and fix it or do it differently. We don't come back as often as a lot of the male candidates do. And I think with Judge Lee, too, at one point he was deemed not qualified by the Fairfax bar.
That's correct. So he had previously been deemed qualified, and then when he was elevated to the circuit court bench, he had been deemed not qualified. And so he went around lobbying the various bar associations. He went around talking to the various members of the General Assembly so that they would know him as a person and as a lawyer, and convince them that he was worthy of an interview before the General Assembly. So they did interview him, and he's gone on to be a circuit court judge, a federal judge, and has had a stellar career.
But he fought his way in.
He did.
He just hacked away at it.
Yes.
Yeah, he did.
And that's not my temperament, frankly.
And I think that's probably true. But, self-advocacy, and I got that from the remarks that David Bulova made. And we actually ran into one of your classmates, Teresa Carter, who was down there on Friday doing exactly that.
That's exactly right. So Teresa, and I know each other from UVA, and so she's applying to be a judge in the counties around the University of Virginia. And she was there. She's a substitute judge, so she wasn't lobbying, but she had someone with her who was lobbying on her behalf.
Got it.
And so she was standing around with her materials, but she had someone who was lobbying on her behalf. And honestly, if I had thought about it or perhaps talked to more people, someone would have said, well, Karen, this is what you can do.
Right.
You can get someone to go around and be your mouthpiece or speak for you.
And is this one of the things maybe that the coalition actually can do? Is to not just bring awareness and visibility and kind of open the door on the process, however varied that may be, but also to say to minority judge candidates, to begin with, judge candidates, this is how we can help you. We train, Emerge Virginia trains women candidates to run for office, and it's the same principle. They teach them the fundamentals of how to run with the big dogs.
Yes.
And so do you see the coalition serving that function?
I do, actually. And while we were there in Richmond, there were several other judicial candidates from Tidewater and Southside and other parts of the state who said, we need the coalition to come to our area and to speak to our bar associations and to speak to our members. And they thanked us because they were off in Williamsburg or Newport News or various places thinking that their stories were similar to mine, and they thought that they were the only ones. And so when we came, to Richmond and shared our stories and participated in the coalition's efforts, they were encouraged and energized, and they want us to take this show on the road, so to speak. And I do think that the coalition can serve that purpose, to encourage and empower all diverse candidates, defense attorneys, women attorneys,
right.
Diverse attorneys, racially and ethnically diverse, to apply for these judgeships. And when you get knocked down, to get back up and try again, and to keep fighting the good fight, because otherwise it's not going to happen.
Right, the balance will not tip.
That's
basically. Right. So how do you think bar associations, because the Commonwealth of Virginia is very diverse. There's lots of rural areas, there's lots of areas that don't have the diversity of population that the communities do in the Crescent, Hampton, Richmond, and Northern Virginia. But is there something that we can do to support every bar association in the Commonwealth to better serve their member attorneys so that we are putting the most qualified minority candidates on the path to be successful?
Yes, I think we need to raise awareness. I think if we were to tell this story to members of the public versus just to other attorneys or members of the legislature, I believe members of the general public would be incensed to know that our Commonwealth is so diverse, particularly the counties that we keep mentioning time and time again. Yet if their child were to be given a speeding ticket and they were to appear in court, there would not be a judge or a bailiff or a court reporter that looks like them, that would understand their culture, that would understand, the statements that they are making, the sentiments that they feel. So I do think we need to engage members of the public. It was interesting. We had sort of a diverse collection of people who comprised the coalition. So not just the attorneys, the mouthpieces, but we also had members of the NAACP. We had members of, not the school board, but the like town council and things of that nature. And the General Assembly seemed to be particularly interested in listening to regular people versus attorneys. So I think we need to engage regular folks in this coalition. And I think we could gain lots of momentum and make the process transparent. I'm not saying we should vote in judges, but if we make the process transparent, I think we can use members of the public to speak for us and on our behalf.
Well, I think every great movement, I sit on the board of Equality Virginia, and I sit on the board of NARAL, and I think every great movement has to have allies. And I think that's what puts a movement over the top, is when people who are not direct beneficiaries of a movement are joined by people who see that it's a matter of fairness and justice, which is kind of an irony here.
Right.
Because we're talking about the justice system, and we're talking about the fact, how can it be more just in who we are actually putting in these critical roles that serve our community?
Yes.
So I'm very hopeful, as an ally to your movement, that we can use some of these tools. This show is one of them.
Yes.
Lobby days are one of them. What do you see as other things that we can do?
Well, like I said, we could definitely speak to other bars as well as members of the public, so your churches, your sororities, your fraternities, any type of town event that's occurring. We could take this show on the road and educate people as to how judges are selected, because I don't think the non-lawyer or common man understands how judges are selected.
I can tell you I didn't.
At all.
Not at all.
I appreciate so much, you're participating in Lobby Day, because you really don't have a dog in the fight.
I don't.
And so you could stand up and be that pit bull and continue to ask those questions that someone who is perhaps thinking of being a judicial candidate would feel a little bit leery of awkward
like,
of asking.
But like being a matter of self-interest and not of greater good.
That's right. Or being perhaps labeled as being an angry black female.
Woman. Angry black woman, yes.
Exactly.
I think people who aren't women don't necessarily understand that we understand how people talk about us when we are not in the room.
That's right.
So we might think we're being assertive. That's not what people call us.
That's exactly right.
And so I do think that has a dampening effect on how strong we are willing to be.
Yes.
When we make our case in front of other people, especially when those other people are men.
That's exactly right. So you can imagine in 2006, 10 years ago, when I was much younger, I was afraid to buck the system, but I'm not afraid anymore.
Excellent. She's not afraid anymore. And so when we come back, I will talk to Justin Fairfax one more time, and we'll figure out how we can support better people like Ann and people like Karen. Join us.
There's more than just books at the library.
There's more than just books at the library.
Excuse me. There's more than just books at the library.
Il n'y a plus que de livres à la bibliothèque.
Hello. You have a lot of great books here today. You know there's more than just books at the library. I know.
There's more than just books at the library.
I don't want to be hooked to a machine.
I want all the medical treatment available to me.
I wouldn't want my family to have to make this decision.
My doctor knows what's best for me.
An advance directive is your life on your terms. Talk with your family. Decide what's right for you. Then put it in writing.
Documenting my wishes today means my family won't have to make heart-wrenching decisions later.
To learn more, visit www.putitinwriting.org.
1,200 American youth run away from their homes every day. The National Runaway Switchboard is here to help. 1-800-RUNAWAY. If you are a runaway, thinking about running away from home, or a parent or guardian concerned about issues facing your child, call us 24 hours a day. 1-800-RUNAWAY. In times of crisis, hope is just a phone call away. 1-800.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and joining me for our final segment is Justin Fairfax. Thank you, Justin, again for being here.
Thank you very much.
So Anne and Karen really make the case, particularly, as you know, women are my particular interest. When we talk about minorities, there's minorities and the minorities are the minorities.
That's right.
But you know, there is a candidate that you talked about quite a bit on Lobby Day on Friday, Turkessa Rollins,
absolutely,
from Prince William County. And of course, what intrigues me about her case is that we don't know how they select judges in Prince William County. David Bulova did a great job of laying out the Fairfax system, which I very much appreciated. I felt educated.
Yeah,
but it's perplexing why this young woman did not get an interview.
It really is perplexing. And just make a quick point. First of all, you talked with Anne and with Karen. I mean, they're extraordinary.
Yes, they are.
And so this is the level and the quality of lawyers that we have, diverse minority women lawyers. I mean, they're the cream of the crop. And so, you know, this is what we're missing from our judiciary. We're missing out on this type of talent, and so that's part of why we're fighting this fight. Turkessa is another in that same line. As you mentioned, she's a fantastic, really extraordinary lawyer. She's in Prince William County. She has applied to be a judge in the very recent past. And what's very interesting about her story is that she applied in 2014. And was, I believe, out of 2 or 3 candidates, ranked about second. So highly regarded, got very high rankings, but there was someone who came out number 1 according to the bar vote. But people thought very highly of Turkessa and said, listen, we're going to pick the number 1 rated candidate, but you know, you should continue to stay involved and apply and come back. I heard you all talk about that earlier about resilience. And so Turkessa, who is very resilient and is a great lawyer, did just that. So she came back the next year. She had incredible accolades. She herself was a substitute judge, so had already served in that capacity, had a great practice, was rated number 1 by the Prince William County Bar the next time that she applied. So she was the top candidate, and yet she wasn't even granted an interview by the legislators. So it's as if the goalposts had shifted and the criterion had changed, and these are the kinds of stories that not only are really distressing and sort of heartbreaking to people, but they highlight some really significant problems in the process. And as you mentioned before, I think there are different processes among the various jurisdictions, and that's an issue because we want to have more transparency, more consistency, so that you don't get a different kind of justice or selection process just because you live, 10 miles down the road. Because frankly, that's what our courts are all about. Inscribed above the U.S. Supreme Court is equal justice under law. Not justice according to where you live, or what you look like, or what your gender is, or what your
And this is unique to Virginia.
Is.
We first of all, we're a commonwealth. Very few commonwealths.
Absolutely.
We're not a state.
That's right.
Try to always remember to say commonwealth.
Absolutely.
But we're one of just a few states who does it this way. So the governor's not appointing somebody, and when they're not elected judges.
That's correct.
So people need to understand the process.
They do, and the process needs to be transparent. And I think our legislators, need to understand the importance of that transparency. Again, not just for the individual candidates, but for the broader public, so that they have trust and confidence in our system of justice and our system of selecting judges, and so that we get the benefit of the really excellent candidates. We talked about whether it's Turkessa, Judge Lee, who I love that you all talked about him.
He's a fighter.
He is a fighter, and
wow.
he's really an extraordinary person. I'm very close to him for a lot of reasons. I clerked for him right at a law school, and it was a transformational experience to work with him. He actually married my wife and I, so we're very close personally, but he is an example of someone who would not have gotten that opportunity.
Had he not persisted beyond that not qualified rating by the Fairfax Bar.
That's right, and coupled with that, had legislators not had the foresight to grant him an interview.
Right.
And that raises a point actually that we had discussed at Lobby Day and overall. This notion that just because one bar, whether it's the Fairfax Bar, of which I'm a member, or any other, just because one bar rates someone as either not qualified or doesn't give them their highest rating, that should not automatically be a veto for legislators to interview someone. And frankly, one of the most important recommendations that we've made is that we need to have a very diverse pool of people who are considered ultimately and interviewed by legislators, regardless of some of the ratings. We've seen an analog. You made a great analogy earlier to the overall problem with the Oscars and how that relates to this. We've seen an analog in professional sports. So one example that I've heard I thought was really great was the Rooney Rule in football. And to give the very 2-second primer for anybody not immersed in that, and familiar with that is there was an issue among head coaches in the NFL where for a very long period of time, no minority head coaches were being selected. Right. You have a lot of vacancies, as we know. A lot of coaches get fired after every season, and yet people were being hired without really advertising the position. It was often they called it a carousel, the same faces, a friend of a friend, moved around, and yet minorities weren't able to break through. So what happened was the owners and the family that owned the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Rooney family, instituted what's known as the Rooney Rule, which said that whenever there's a head coaching vacancy, you must interview a minority candidate. It doesn't mean you must guarantee them.
Must not, slot. You have to select them.
You don't have to select them, but you have to at least give them a shot. And a great example with a wonderful connection to the Commonwealth of Virginia is Mike Tomlin of the Pittsburgh Steelers, an extraordinary head coach. He went to William & Mary, actually played at William & Mary. He got interviewed by the Steelers as a result of the Rooney Rule. He otherwise would not have gotten interviewed. He wasn't the top candidate coming in. People didn't really think that he was number one, but when they met him, he wowed them. His knowledge, his presence.
He was who they were looking for.
He was the person, and they never would have had him. And 2 more Super Bowls later, he is still the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And so that's the kind of power of an example of when you broaden up the pool, you broaden up opportunity, and you give people a shot. You really, again, everybody benefits. That individual candidate, the organization, and our system of justice in this
Let's
case.
talk about the pipeline, because we talked a little bit about clerkships and the fact that diverse judges mean, hypothetically, that they're hiring more diverse clerks.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about prosecutors.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of power in that prosecutor's position, a lot. And if there's not a lot of diversity in prosecutors, and prosecutors make up the bulk of the candidates chosen for judgeships, you can already see that that's an avenue that's skewed too far the other way.
That's right. And you've identified another really critical pipeline issue and pressure point. I'm happy to head up the task force. We have a task force that heads up Commonwealth's attorneys, outreach, the judiciary, and also public defenders. I'm heading up the portion that deals with Commonwealth's attorneys as a former federal prosecutor myself. It is so important that we have prosecutors' offices, again, that are reflective of the community, both with regard to opportunities for people to go on to become judges, but also, as you mentioned earlier, so that people have confidence in the system of justice as they see it playing out in their everyday lives. Many people won't ever find themselves in a courtroom subject to some sort of criminal
if they live
trial. If things go
I try
well.
to avoid it.
But things happen, and even if you're not personally in that position, you still want to have the confidence in the system that others are being treated fairly, and you're a great example of that. I mean, we've talked about this. So again, it's really important from that standpoint. It's important that we have public defenders again that reflect the community. Again, I was a federal prosecutor. My oldest brother was also a federal prosecutor, Department of Justice. So I followed in his footsteps, and where I worked actually was a relatively diverse place with really extraordinary lawyers, people I loved working with and really top notch. But you really have to be intentional, as you know, about creating additional diversity. At the state level, we have a long way to go. We have some offices where they have virtually zero diverse attorneys, which is extraordinary. Again,
Right.
in 2016, in Northern Virginia, which is as diverse a part of the state as we have,
That's true.
To have little or no diversity is really inexcusable. And I think we've got to put the onus not only on members of the coalition and others who are we're fighting alongside each other for these issues, but again, our legislators, our elected officials, our appointed officials have got to step up. And they have got to prioritize diversity. They have got to not only in word say that these things are important, but in deed. They have got to continue to, again, increase the number of people who are interviewed. That will lead to more people being selected. Again, our Mike Tomlin example is a powerful one. Our Judge Lee example is a powerful one. But the time for sort of excuses and explanations as to why it's as bad as it is has passed.
Exactly.
And
I mean, and last night, the president of the Screen Actors Guild thought so too, and went out on stage and said, we all have to wear some responsibility for changing the outcome. And I think allies are important in this movement for that reason.
That's right.
Because all of us are subject to the court system, the judicial. All of us are under the purview of the judicial system one way or another.
That's right.
And so all of us should care. It is a community issue.
That's exactly right.
And so I'm going to ask that we put up a slide that shows how people can get involved. You've got a Twitter account.
Yes, we do.
You've got a Facebook page.
Absolutely.
You've got a Gmail account.
Yes.
And that people who want to be allies, no matter where they live, not just in Northern Virginia, but we hope to have this coalition throughout the Commonwealth.
Absolutely.
Can get involved.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing that contact information. We have just gotten incredible excitement and momentum around this movement. This really started in January. Here we are, February the 29th. It was a call to action. We wanted to get people involved and make them aware.
And it's a pent-up, unmet need.
It is. It absolutely is.
You've tapped a vein. It's what Karen said, is you get into a room and you suddenly realize you are not the only one. Suddenly you are sharing stories with other people who are like, me too.
Absolutely.
And that's a powerful thing.
It is a very powerful thing. It brings people together, and that word coalition really means something, because it is a group of people across a broad spectrum who all realize that this is a significant problem. But it's also a significant opportunity.
Absolutely.
So if we band together, if we, again, act and demand action now, it is going to lead to a stronger judicial system. It's going to lead to more confidence in the system, to more opportunity for people, and that's going to lead to a stronger Commonwealth of Virginia. Some of the tensions that you see around the country, many of them have their roots in the fact that people feel excluded. That people feel like whether it's a legislative body or a judicial system is not representative of the community. Well, when we demonstrate that we care about everyone equally, we give opportunity to people on an equal footing, that lessens a lot of that tension, and it gets us closer to where we know we want to be and we know who we really are. But we've got to take action, and we need results. We don't need excuses. We don't need people to explain to us why these numbers are so bad. I want the next time for us to meet with them to explain to us why the numbers have changed.
I agree with that. I agree with that. And I am very hopeful because, especially in Fairfax County, where I know so many of the members of our delegation, I have faith that they can look at this issue and figure out ways to solve it.
Absolutely.
So I encourage everybody out there to get involved with this coalition, be an ally. And thank you so much, Justin. Thank you to Karen. Thank you to Ann. And please get involved with the coalition. You've got the contact information. And let's talk to our legislators. All of us have at least 2 of them. So get in touch with your delegate, talk to your senator, and let's see how we can solve this problem here in the Commonwealth.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
Thank you.
Thank you.